There is something about CERN that seems almost designed to attract conspiracy theories. If you were trying to invent a fictional organization for a supernatural thriller, you would probably come up with something very similar. A huge international scientific institution on the French-Swiss border, a machine buried around 100 meters underground, a circular tunnel 27 kilometers long, thousands of superconducting magnets, particles traveling at almost the speed of light, experiments attempting to recreate conditions that existed just after the Big Bang, scientists openly searching for dark matter, extra dimensions, and particles that may disappear somewhere our instruments cannot follow. Then you put a 2-meter statue of Shiva outside, and a few years later, a video appears showing hooded figures apparently performing a human sacrifice beneath that statue. At that point, you can hardly blame the internet for becoming interested. The basic conspiracy theory surrounding CERN is simple enough. The Large Hadron Collider, according to the theory, was never built merely to study particle physics. Its real purpose is to break through something, a barrier between dimensions, a boundary in space-time, perhaps even a door between our world and somewhere else. Different versions of the theory disagree about what is supposed to be on the other side. Some say another universe, some say an alternate timeline, some say intelligent entities, some say demons. And some believe CERN already succeeded years ago, and that whatever happened afterwards changed reality in a way most of us would never be able to prove. The rabbit hole begins properly in 2008. That was the year the Large Hadron Collider first started up. Even before the machine was switched on, people were worried about it. And this wasn't initially occult stuff. It was much more straightforward. People thought CERN might accidentally destroy the world. The concerns centered on microscopic black holes. The Large Hadron Collider works by accelerating particles in opposite directions around an enormous underground ring, and then smashing them together at incredibly high energies. Those collisions allow physicists to study conditions we normally cannot reproduce on Earth. Some theoretical models suggested that sufficiently energetic collisions might produce microscopic black holes. CERN's position was, and remains, that any such objects would either disappear almost instantly or be harmless. Their safety argument also points to cosmic rays, which have been creating collisions at even higher energies throughout the universe for billions of years, without apparently destroying planets and stars. But to somebody hearing about the machine for the first time, the phrase, "the scientists think any black holes they create will probably disappear immediately," doesn't necessarily inspire the calming effect scientists intend. And the concerns became serious enough that attempts were made to stop the collider from operating. There were legal actions. Scientists involved in the project received threats. News outlets ran stories asking whether the most expensive physics experiment ever built could end civilization before it had even properly started. CERN responded with safety reports and explanations. And then on the 10th of September 2008, the first beam was successfully circulated around the machine. The world didn't end, at least not obviously. But that was only the beginning. Because the stranger CERN became in the public imagination, the more people started noticing details that seemed almost too perfect. One of those details had been sitting outside the laboratory since 2004. A statue of the Hindu deity Shiva. Not a small decorative figure tucked away in an office. A large bronze statue of Shiva in the form of Nataraja, the cosmic dancer. The statue was a gift from India, celebrating the country's long relationship with CERN. There is nothing secret about that. CERN itself documented its unveiling. But the symbolism immediately fascinated conspiracy communities. Because Shiva is not just any random religious figure. In the Nataraja form, Shiva's cosmic dance represents creation and destruction, the constant cycle through which the universe is created, transformed, and dissolved. Now imagine discovering this after already being suspicious of CERN. You have the world's most powerful particle collider. It is being used to recreate conditions from the beginning of the universe. Physicists are talking about fundamental reality, invisible matter, and extra dimensions. And outside the building stands a dancing deity associated with the destruction and recreation of the cosmos. For a conspiracy theorist, that is almost offensively convenient. The statue became one of the central pieces of CERN mythology. People began analyzing everything around it. Why Shiva? Why that particular form of Shiva? Why place a religious symbol at a scientific facility at all? Others started looking at CERN's logo and claimed they could see 3 sixes hidden inside it. The logo is supposed to represent particle accelerators, and depending on how determined you are, you can arrange its curved lines into something resembling 666. That theory still circulates constantly. And this is where the CERN conspiracy begins to take on a particular character. It isn't simply that the Large Hadron Collider might be dangerous. The theory becomes that CERN knows exactly what it is doing. The symbols are interpreted as clues, maybe jokes, maybe boasts, maybe ritualistic references hidden in plain sight. And then CERN itself began discussing extra dimensions. This is one of the reasons the portal conspiracy survived when most of the original black hole panic faded away. Because extra dimensions are not something conspiracy theorists invented and then attached to CERN afterwards. CERN really does investigate physics that could point towards dimensions beyond the familiar 3 dimensions of space. On CERN's own website, there is an explanation of how physicists might look for evidence of extra dimensions. One proposed sign would involve gravitons, hypothetical particles associated with gravity. CERN explains that if gravitons exist, they might be created in Large Hadron Collider collisions, and then rapidly disappear into extra dimensions. To a physicist, this is a technical description of a theoretical possibility. To somebody already imagining CERN as an interdimensional machine, it sounds quite different. Scientists are smashing particles together beneath the ground, looking for evidence that something has vanished from our universe and gone somewhere else. And that brings us to one of the most repeated quotes in the entire CERN conspiracy world. A former CERN director of research, Sergio Bertolucci, was reported as saying that the Large Hadron Collider might open a door to an extra dimension, and that something might come through that door, or something might be sent through it. In context, physicists were talking about theoretical particle behavior. But once that sentence escaped into the wider internet, context barely mattered anymore. CERN, door, extra dimension, something might come through. You can see why it's stuck. From that point onwards, the idea that CERN was trying to open a portal became almost impossible to kill. And the conspiracy got another enormous boost in 2012. On the 4th of July that year, scientists at CERN announced the discovery of a new particle consistent with the Higgs boson. The Higgs boson had become famous outside physics under a much more dramatic nickname, the God particle. Physicists generally dislike that nickname, but the damage had been done. To the public, CERN had built a gigantic underground machine, smashed matter together at almost unimaginable energies, and discovered something called the God particle. And the year was 2012. Anyone old enough to remember that year will remember that it already carried a strange atmosphere online. The supposed end of the Mayan calendar had been turned into an enormous doomsday industry. People predicted pole shifts, solar catastrophes, alien contact, spiritual transformation, and the end of the world. Films had already been made about it. Forums were full of it. Then, right in the middle of that year, CERN announced the Higgs discovery. Nothing obviously supernatural happened. December came and went. The planet remained exactly where it was. But years later, a much stranger theory began developing. What if the world actually did end in 2012? Not with explosions, not with fire, not in a way we would notice. What if CERN's experiments somehow shifted us into another universe? This theory became entangled with something called the Mandela Effect. The Mandela Effect is the name given to situations where large groups of people remember something differently from the documented version of events. The name comes from people who claim to remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison during the 1980s. Despite the fact that he was released, became president of South Africa, and died in 2013. Then people started finding other examples. Was it the Berenstain Bears or the Berenstein Bears? Did the Monopoly Man have a monocle? What exactly did Darth Vader say to Luke? People found logos they remembered differently. Song lines, film scenes, brand names, geography, historical events. Most explanations for the Mandela Effect involve ordinary failures of human memory, shared misconceptions, and the way our brains reconstruct information. But online communities developed another possibility. Perhaps people's memories weren't wrong. Perhaps reality was. And CERN provided the perfect mechanism. The theory goes that when CERN reached new energy levels, perhaps during the search for the Higgs boson, the collider caused some sort of disturbance in spacetime. Maybe our universe was destroyed, and consciousness somehow continued in a neighboring reality. Maybe 2 timelines merged. Maybe we moved into a universe almost identical to our original one, except for small details. And those small details are what people experience as Mandela effects. It sounds completely mad when you state it plainly. But spend a few hours reading posts from people who genuinely believe something changed around 2012, and you begin to understand why CERN became such an attractive explanation. There are Reddit threads containing people who insist the world has felt different ever since. They talk about time moving faster, people behaving differently, culture becoming stranger, politics becoming more surreal. A general feeling that reality somehow lost its previous texture. Obviously, those feelings are subjective. But the interesting thing is how consistently people attach them to the same period. Then came 2016. If 2012 is the year CERN supposedly broke reality, 2016 is the year conspiracy communities believe whatever happened became visible. It is difficult to overstate how important 2016 is in this particular rabbit hole. People who discuss timeline shifts constantly point towards it. Some describe it as the year everything became absurd. Others say 2016 was when the world began feeling artificial, and CERN was running the Large Hadron Collider at much higher collision energies than during its first operational period. Then, in the summer of 2016, something happened on CERN property that could hardly have been better designed to send conspiracy theorists completely insane. A video appeared online. It was filmed at night. The person recording appeared to be watching from inside a building. Outside, near CERN's statue of Shiva, a group of figures dressed in black robes gathered in a circle. A woman was placed on the ground. One of the hooded figures raised what appeared to be a knife. Then the figure brought it down towards her body. The person filming reacted in horror and ran. The video looked like footage of an occult human sacrifice taking place at CERN. And unlike a lot of internet conspiracy material, one part of the story was immediately undeniable. The video really had been filmed at CERN. The location was genuine. The Shiva statue was genuine. The people in robes were actually standing on the grounds of the laboratory. CERN responded. The organization said the event had been staged without official permission. It was described as a prank or spoof. Nobody had actually been sacrificed. CERN said that some visitors or people with access had taken their humor too far, and that the performance could create misunderstandings about the scientific nature of its work. Which is fair enough. But from the perspective of people who already believed CERN was involved in occult activity, the explanation did almost nothing. In fact, it arguably made the story more compelling. Because now they could say the video wasn't filmed on some movie set. It wasn't a random group of teenagers in a forest. Somebody with access to one of the most famous scientific facilities in the world had genuinely organized an occult-looking mock sacrifice directly beneath the statue of Shiva. Why? As a joke. That is the official explanation. And maybe that is exactly what it was. Scientists and students are perfectly capable of having extremely stupid senses of humor. But imagine trying to explain that event to somebody who already believes your machine is intended to open portals. No, we're not occultists. Those hooded people pretending to murder a woman beneath the statue of the cosmic destroyer were only joking. It is one of those moments where reality appears to be helping the conspiracy theory. And the timing made everything worse. In the same period, strange photographs and videos circulated online, claiming to show bizarre cloud formations above Geneva. Some looked like enormous swirling storms. Others were presented with captions claiming CERN had created a vortex directly above the facility. There were videos with titles suggesting a portal had opened in the sky. People connected the images with the Large Hadron Collider. Had CERN finally created the doorway people had been warning about? Was the strange weather evidence of something happening above the machine? The pictures and videos spread across conspiracy sites and social media. Some were miscaptioned. Some were manipulated, or detached from their original context. But once they became part of the CERN mythology, that hardly mattered. The image of a dark rotating cloud above Geneva became visual proof for people who already believed the collider could tear open reality. Then there was another coincidence from 2016. The Gotthard Base Tunnel opened in Switzerland in June. Now, the Gotthard Tunnel has nothing to do with CERN. It is a railway tunnel through the Alps. But the opening ceremony was so bizarre that it immediately got pulled into the same conspiracy world. The ceremony featured performers in strange costumes, winged figures, people moving in ritualistic formations, and a central character resembling a goat-like or horned being. To many viewers, it looked less like the opening of a railway tunnel and more like an occult theater production. Videos of the ceremony spread with descriptions involving Satanism, Baphomet, ritual magic, and elite symbolism. And because this happened in Switzerland, during the same year CERN was running high-energy experiments, people connected the two. Again, there is no organizational connection between CERN and the Gotthard ceremony. But conspiracy theories do not grow according to organizational charts. They grow through patterns. Switzerland, underground tunnels, strange ritual imagery, CERN, Shiva, a mock sacrifice, portal theories, extra dimensions. 2016. Placed beside each other, the events created a story. And once the story existed, new details were absorbed into it. People started looking more closely at the geography around CERN. One frequently repeated claim involves Saint-Denis-Pouilly, the French commune near CERN. The word Pouilly has occasionally been pulled apart by conspiracy writers looking for references to Apollo, or Apollyon, the destroyer or angel of the bottomless pit in the Book of Revelation. This is linguistically dubious, but it became another piece of the mythology. Revelation describes the opening of a bottomless pit. CERN sits underground. CERN has a statue associated with destruction. CERN investigates extra dimensions. Physicists talk about particles disappearing somewhere else. The collider itself is an enormous ring. To believers, these things become symbols in the same system. And then, Saturn enters the story. This is where the CERN conspiracy becomes considerably more occult. There is a whole branch of online conspiracy theory centered around Saturn. Saturn's hexagonal storm, the black cube, ancient gods, time, Chronos, the cult of Saturn. The idea that certain symbols appearing in religion, entertainment, architecture, and corporate branding point towards an ancient Saturnian tradition. Within that world, some researchers argue that CERN is not trying to open just any portal. They believe it is attempting to recreate what they call a Saturn stargate. One Reddit thread discussing the theory connects CERN with a supposed ancient configuration of Saturn, Venus, Mars, and Earth. The claim is that an electrical or celestial alignment once produced something resembling a portal or cosmic gateway. According to this theory, CERN's experiments are an artificial attempt to reproduce that lost doorway. This is where people start connecting CERN with the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel in the conspiracy interpretation was not merely a tall building. It was an attempt by ancient humanity to gain access to heaven, another realm, or a higher dimension. CERN becomes a modern technological Babel. Instead of bricks and mortar, humanity uses superconducting magnets. Instead of physically building upwards, we smash particles together and try to punch through the structure of reality itself. Again, this isn't physics. It is mythology being mapped onto physics, but there is something compelling about the comparison. The actual language CERN uses is already enormous in scale. The fundamental laws of nature, the origins of the universe, extra dimensions, dark matter, antimatter, conditions immediately after the Big Bang. These are not small questions. They are the sort of questions religion and mythology have always tried to answer. So when science begins using machines powerful enough to investigate them directly, it is almost inevitable that religious and occult interpretations will follow. And CERN has never really escaped that collision between science and mythology. Even the Higgs boson became the God particle. The Shiva statue connects particle physics to a cosmic dance of creation and destruction. The machine itself is a vast circle buried beneath the earth. The experiments involve energies, invisible forces, and dimensions nobody can see. For someone interested in occult symbolism, CERN is practically irresistible. Then there is the possibility of microscopic black holes. CERN itself discusses this openly. Some theories involving extra dimensions suggest that microscopic black holes could appear in high-energy collisions. CERN says that if they were produced, they would disintegrate almost instantly. But the fact that the phrase microscopic black holes appears anywhere in an explanation of what your machine might create is enough to ensure that conspiracy forums will never leave you alone. And there is another idea that appears repeatedly: vacuum decay. This is one of the more genuinely unsettling concepts because it comes from theoretical physics rather than occultism. The simplified idea is that our universe may exist in a state that appears stable, but is not the lowest possible energy state. If some event somehow triggered a transition into a lower energy state, a bubble could theoretically form and expand at close to the speed of light, changing the laws of physics inside it. You would never see it coming. There would be no warning, no dramatic black hole hanging in the sky. Reality as we know it would simply cease. Stephen Hawking once discussed the theoretical possibility that the Higgs field could become unstable at extraordinarily high energies. His comments were repeatedly turned into headlines suggesting the God particle could destroy the universe. Physicists pointed out that the energies required would be far beyond what the Large Hadron Collider can produce. But in CERN conspiracy circles, the important part was that the possibility of vacuum instability existed at all. The argument became, how confident should anybody be when experimenting with forces connected to the structure of the universe itself? And that question is central to nearly every CERN theory. Not necessarily that CERN scientists are evil. Sometimes the theory is that they are arrogant, that they are doing something whose consequences they cannot possibly understand. Human beings have a long history of discovering something first and asking what it does to us afterwards. Nuclear weapons are the obvious example. Artificial intelligence is becoming another. CERN conspiracy theorists simply apply that anxiety to particle physics. What if the scientists are wrong? What if there are dimensions beyond ours, but they are not empty? What if opening a path into another dimension is not equivalent to opening a laboratory door? What if something notices? That last idea appears constantly in paranormal versions of the theory. People describe the Large Hadron Collider less as a machine and more as a beacon. Perhaps the experiment doesn't physically tear a hole in space. Perhaps the energy or conditions it creates make our world detectable to things that normally cannot interact with us. There are posts linking CERN with increases in UFO sightings. Posts connecting it to sleep paralysis. Posts claiming paranormal activity intensifies when the collider is running. Posts alleging that entities are entering through temporary dimensional openings. Almost none of this could be tested in any meaningful way. But the stories exist, and every time CERN announces another run, the same pattern repeats. The collider starts. Social media fills with warnings. People predict earthquakes, storms, timeline changes, portals, demons, reality glitches. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes something strange happens somewhere in the world, because something strange is always happening somewhere in the world, and it gets attached to CERN. When CERN restarted the Large Hadron Collider in July 2022 after a long shutdown, conspiracy theories exploded again. People claimed the date itself was significant. Others predicted another timeline shift. Some said the machine would open a portal. There were warnings that people should watch for changes in reality after the collider reached new energy levels. And then people did exactly that. They watched. Every coincidence became more interesting. Every strange news event became evidence. Every new Mandela Effect could be interpreted as another alteration. This creates a problem that makes the theory almost impossible to disprove from inside itself. If nothing happens, perhaps the change was too subtle to notice. If something happens, CERN might have caused it. If your memory differs from the documented past, perhaps you came from the previous timeline. And if other people remember the same thing, that becomes confirmation. It is a conspiracy theory perfectly adapted to uncertainty. There is no single event you could point to and say, there, that proves CERN opened a portal. Instead, the theory is built from accumulation. The black hole fears. The extra dimensions. The Shiva statue. The logo. The Higgs boson. 2012. The Mandela Effect. 2016. The ritual video. The clouds. The Gotthard ceremony. Saturn. The Tower of Babel. Comments from physicists about doors to other dimensions. Research into particles that could disappear into those dimensions. None of those things individually proves anything paranormal. But put them together at 2 a.m. while scrolling through conspiracy threads, and the whole thing begins to acquire a strange internal logic. And there is one aspect of CERN that makes this sort of theory unusually persistent. The real science is almost impossible for ordinary people to understand. That is not an insult. Particle physics is difficult even for extremely intelligent people who haven't spent years studying it. Ask somebody what CERN actually does, and most will say something about smashing atoms together. Ask what the Higgs field is, and the room becomes quieter. Ask how extra-dimensional theories work, and suddenly everyone remembers they left the oven on. That knowledge gap creates space for mythology. When a scientific institution says it is searching for invisible particles that may escape into extra dimensions, most of us cannot independently check the mathematics. We either trust the physicists or we don't. Conspiracy culture lives in that space between expertise and trust. And distrust of institutions has only increased since CERN first switched on the Large Hadron Collider. Governments have lied. Corporations have lied. Intelligence agencies have conducted experiments the public knew nothing about until decades later. Scientific institutions are made of human beings, and human beings are perfectly capable of secrecy, ambition, and terrible judgment. That doesn't mean CERN is secretly summoning demons. But it explains why simply saying, experts assure us it is safe, doesn't end the conversation for everyone. There is also the question of what CERN actually hopes to find. The standard model of particle physics has been astonishingly successful. But CERN itself openly says there are major questions it does not answer. Dark matter. Why matter dominates over antimatter. the full nature of the Higgs field, possibly physics beyond the standard model, possibly evidence pointing towards extra dimensions. That phrase appears repeatedly. Beyond the standard model. To a physicist, it means new physics. To a conspiracy theorist, it sounds like the beginning of a warning. The Large Hadron Collider is essentially a machine designed to push reality until something unexpected falls out. That is what makes it scientifically important. It is also what makes it terrifying if you already believe reality contains things humanity should leave alone. And the machine is not finished. In June 2026, CERN switched off the Large Hadron Collider and began its most ambitious upgrade so far. The collider has entered a long shutdown. Large sections of equipment are being removed and replaced. The goal is to transform it into the high-luminosity Large Hadron Collider. When the upgraded machine reaches full operation, CERN says it will increase the number of particle collisions by as much as a factor of 10, compared with the collider's original design. That doesn't mean 10 times the collision energy. Luminosity is about producing far more collisions and therefore far more data. But you can already imagine how that sentence will appear online. CERN is making the machine 10 times more powerful. CERN is preparing another experiment. CERN is going further than before. The gradual restart of the accelerator complex is expected from 2028, with the high-luminosity era planned to begin around 2030. So, the portal theories are not going anywhere. If anything, they are likely to become louder. And perhaps that is why CERN remains one of the most fascinating conspiracy subjects on the internet. Most conspiracy theories begin with an event and try to construct a hidden explanation. CERN is different. The institution itself already sounds unbelievable. A 27-kilometer underground machine. Magnets colder than outer space. Particles moving almost at light speed. Temperatures created in collisions far hotter than the center of the sun. Antimatter. Dark matter. Microscopic black holes. Extra dimensions. The God particle. A bronze Shiva dancing outside. Then somebody actually stages a fake human sacrifice underneath it. At a certain point, the conspiracy writers barely have to do any work. And maybe nothing paranormal has ever happened there. Maybe every strange detail has an ordinary explanation. The statue was a diplomatic gift. The ritual was a stupid prank. The portal language refers to theoretical physics. The Mandela Effect is memory. The logo is just a logo. The clouds were clouds. The Gotthard ceremony was theater. The black holes, if they can even be produced, would vanish instantly. That may be the entire story. But there is another possibility that keeps people coming back. What if our understanding of reality is incomplete in ways nobody at CERN or anywhere else fully understands? That part is unquestionably true. There are enormous gaps in physics. There are things we know we do not know. There may be things we do not even know how to ask about yet. And CERN exists precisely because scientists want to push into that darkness. That is what science does. It opens doors, usually metaphorical ones. The conspiracy begins with the possibility that one day, the metaphor stops being a metaphor. Imagine, just for a moment, that the portal theory were true. Not necessarily the demons, not necessarily occult rituals or Saturn or the Tower of Babel. Strip all of that away. Imagine the Large Hadron Collider really could create some microscopic interaction with another dimension. At first, nobody would see a glowing doorway. The first evidence might be exactly what physicists already search for: missing energy. A particle apparently disappearing from our detectable universe. An imbalance in the collision. Something going somewhere we cannot observe. Scientists would celebrate. A result like that could transform physics. They would repeat the experiment, increase the data, study it, try again, and again. Because that is what you are supposed to do when an experiment produces something extraordinary. Now imagine the interaction could work both ways. What would the first sign be? A particle appearing where it shouldn't? An unexplained energy signature? Something that looks like detector noise? How many times would you need to see it before you realized you weren't simply observing a new particle? And if intelligence existed on the other side, would it even recognize what we were doing? Would it understand that the collision was artificial? Would it investigate us in return? That is the genuinely creepy heart of the CERN conspiracy. Not rogue scientists chanting beneath Shiva. Not Satan hidden in a company logo. The possibility that humanity has built a machine capable of touching something outside our normal experience without having the faintest idea what touching it might mean. It is the same fear behind countless old stories. Do not open the sealed door. Do not read the forbidden book. Do not call the name. Do not enter the cave. Do not perform the ritual unless you know how to close it. The modern version simply replaces candles and Latin with superconductors and mathematics. And perhaps that is why the occult imagery attaches itself so easily to CERN. The basic human story is ancient. Somebody wants knowledge. The knowledge is hidden. There is a boundary. The boundary exists for a reason. The clever person decides the warning doesn't apply to them. Then the door opens. Whether CERN has ever opened anything beyond a new field of physics is another question entirely. But there is one final thought worth considering. If reality genuinely changed because of something that happened at CERN, how would you prove it? Suppose two timelines merged. Every physical record around you would belong to the new timeline. Photographs, books, newspapers, databases, birth certificates, film dialogue, logos, everything. The only thing you could possibly carry from the previous version would be memory. And memory is unreliable. That means the exact evidence you would expect from a timeline shift would look almost identical to ordinary false memory. People saying they swear something used to be different. People discovering others remember it too. No physical proof, no way back. Just the persistent feeling that something is wrong. That is why CERN and the Mandela Effect fit together so perfectly as a conspiracy theory. The theory explains its own lack of evidence, and it transforms one of the most ordinary weaknesses of the human brain into the only possible surviving trace of a cosmic event. Maybe that's clever storytelling. Maybe it is collective paranoia. Maybe reality has always felt strange, and the internet simply gave millions of people somewhere to compare notes. Or maybe, somewhere beneath the French-Swiss border, humanity built the biggest machine in history for asking the universe what it is made of. And one day, something answered. Whatever you believe, the next chapter has already been scheduled. The old Large Hadron Collider has been shut down for its major upgrade. The machinery is being changed. The detectors are being rebuilt. And when the new era begins, CERN plans to produce vastly more collisions than before. More chances to see something rare, more chances to find something unexpected, more chances, if you believe the people in the darker corners of the internet, to knock on a door we were never meant to find. For now, the tunnel is quiet.